Okay, number one here is analyze the similarities and differences in the history of this system and that of the United States system. I'm sorry, no, this is the introduction of two corrections addressed in this paper. This paper will deal with the introduction of corrections and its history and legal aspects. To know that at least a little bit of the captivating history, legal and social, you have gained and improved understanding the concepts and practices, operations, and how we got where corrections is today through the 21st century. An interest in reducing crime, protecting children, salvaging redeemable offenders, and interest in civilian and social safety nation and investing in unprecedented amount of time and money in correctional systems. The penal system is a structure of agencies administered in judicial prisoners and community-based program like parole and probation boards. This system is part of a larger criminal justice system, which additionally includes police, prosecutors, and courts. And it is important to understand why corrections is such a growing field, and a variety of reasons is that. Between 1972 and 2008, the number of state inmates grew from 705% before the beginning of 2009. That's a lot. Corrections have become a major industry, annually costing over $75 billion recently, and for that reason, they have a real need to hire competent, educated, motivated people. Never in the history of the United States has a high percentage of citizens been incarcerated in its prisons. Next is analyze the similarities and differences of history of this system and that of the United States. I use the UK a lot. Some or the Middle East. Compared to history in the Middle East, we are quite different in the treatment of crimes of both enlightened country and a younger country with an understanding of the past, and we don't really follow the eye for an eye technique. They use retaliation and atonement. Some of these practices are still used today, as you saw a woman getting stoned in the paper just about a week ago. One similarity of the early American and the Middle East are the blood feuds. A family would take revenge of another, called a vendetta. One famous blood feud was the Hatfields and the McCoys, among many others. To understand the history and development of corrections, we need to look at different eras as similarities and differences. Change made in the United States as construction of prisons and facilities were changed and how they reflected through those eras. These were many changes in attitude in the prison and construction. Build higher walls. Some of the differences were the imprisonment was necessary for people because in the old country they believed if you're evil you must be punished. People were out of touch with God. They needed to be reported. Others that they were poorly educated and to function in modern society. Also, they were too sick to be cured. Another difference is that they were physiologically underpinning the model of corrections were built on. Next one is analyze similarities and differences of correction ideologies in the system of that of the United States. The incarceration rate in England, which has a serious violent crime rate of 219% per 100,000 people, would be compared to that of the United States, which has a much higher violent crime rate of 555 per 100,000. And where subsequently much greater probability that the citizen would be brought to court and sentenced for some form of incarceration. One would assume that nations so radically different crime problems would have such different incarceration rates, even if their sentencing practices were similar. British prisons are not a walk in the park, but HM Prison Service would tell you that the biggest difference between UK and US prisons is that by large UK prisons, the prison officers are in control of the inmates all the time. UK prisons, system does not have an overcrowding that the American prisons do. HM prison service is much smaller, not just in the absolute, but in relative terms. The U.S. has about 5 times as many prisoners per head of population as do England. As a result, prisons are a mysterious place for British people. This is a pun, and by they perhaps aren't for Americans. Next is analyze similarities, differences of the sentence used in this system and that of the United States system. Biggest difference in sentencing compared to the United States for crimes as compared to England is our country's is longevity. U.S. research shows the little to no correlation between time spent in prison and recidivism. In other words, a longer sentence does not necessarily reduce the chance that a person will commit a legal offense again, unless the person is in prison until death. Yet, in addition to more extensive reliance in incarceration in the U.S. tends to give longer sentences, further serving the increased U.S. incarceration rate. The average sentence length in all U.S. and the U.S. Sentences in the U.S. is 63 months, and that is higher than Australia's 36 months. Germany is between 1 to 2 years. Differences in sentencing for drug offenses in particular will contribute to the disparity of sentences. People convicted for drug offenses in the U.S. on average sentence is 5 years compared to 32 months in England. Next is analyze the similarities, intermediate sanctions, the system of both the United States. Day reporting centers are used as effective correctional sanction in both the United States and United Kingdom. Examining similarities and differences in day reporting centers both in England and America illustrates the flexibility, cost effectiveness, and potential for expanded use of this concept. The British Home Office asked Parliament to create the Day Treatment Center in 1972. At the same time, it was an independent movement by local probation agencies and open centers to provide group services. In the United States, the first one was opened in 1986 in Hampden County, Massachusetts Sheriff's Department, and the center was used for early release program selected county jail inmates. This and other early day reporting centers drew more than 10 years of experience, America did, from the British centers. Next is analyze similarities and differences in custody functions in the systems, the United States system. Difference in custody functions in the U.S. and the UK have now are reduced recidivism and different strategies used. The United States and the United Kingdom apply similar principles in both prison systems. By the ways they use it implemented are quite dissimilar. Lower recidivism, which means going and getting back in trouble and going back to jail, have proven successful through a number of avenues and compiled a list of implementing risk needs assessment, reinforcement, and ongoing support. The evidence-based approaches are a great start for reducing recidivism in prison. Prison systems in the U.S. and UK ought to ensure that the following guidelines established are proven methods and not stray towards the opinion that prisoners are simply cheap labor. Next is the similarities and difference in treatment in the treatments in the U.S. In the United States, there's been reports of the commitment of treatment programs have diminished over the past quarter. Why these treatment programs have presented to face an attack on apparent bankruptcy, rehabilitation to open the question. At least 3 possible reasons can suggest institutional inertia, which made eliminating programs and firing staff more work than keeping them. Their functionality treatment programs reduce inmate idleness, and thus contribute to institutional order and continuing commitment among correction leaders to rehabilitation. Not surprisingly, during this period, it is estimated that a proportion of inmates participating in drug programs rose from 4.4% to 32.7%. As with the quality treatment centers, may not exist to address the specific needs of offenders. Second, the availability in places of treatment centers does not always match the supply. The United Kingdom can serve as a model, as it has moved away from a predominantly public system to both a public and private system. Next is analyze similarities and differences in gender treatment. The treatment of women in the United States and England have a lot of similarities, as both countries, the population increases boomed over the years for women in prison. In England and Wales, women have found to be 14 times more likely than men to harm themselves. Women are more likely than men to do it repeatedly. In the U.S., female prisoners are 3 times more likely than males to have to report experience physical or sexual abuse before their imprisonment, often reporting a poor physical or mental health, according to the WHO. A high portion of women in prison suffer from alcohol and drug dependency and problematic drug use, and higher among women than men, which is a problem in both countries. The European Union member states and Norway, female prisoners are also more likely to inject drugs than male prisoners, thereby exposing themselves to risks of HIV and other bloodborne viruses. Women are greater than men at entering prisons with sexually transmitted infections such as chlamydia, gonorrhea, syphilis, HIV/AIDS. Often past high-risk sexual behaviors, including prostitution, sex work, and other victim abuse. Services designed specifically for women, helping them feel safe and reported, considered general Pacific issues, are seldom provided. Next is the differences and similarities in handling special category offenders. This one I found that the special category offenders, such as people with physical, mental, and behavioral and disadvantaged backgrounds, often handled similarly in both countries. I found that the U.S. is more likely sometimes to hide them away from mainstream prisoners. Next is the similarities and differences of offenders' rights with the U.S. and England. Some of the rights in both United States and England on this issue, not much difference. They are rights against cruel and unusual punishment, sexual harassment, and sex crimes, right to complain about prison conditions and access to court, special rights for disabled people, medical and health care. Biggest difference is we have a constitution with First Amendment rights for discrimination. Next is the differences and similarities in the system, United States system with parole. Eligible federal prisoners serving sentences for less than 30 years have committed offenses in November 1987 through the application process, receive initial parole hearing within 120 days of commitment in the federal institution. D.C. Code offenders receive an initial hearing within 9 months of parole eligible date of the Bureau of Prisons. Prisoners may apply for parole in the Parole Release Board release guidelines, which are formatted in the manner to release decisions, and therefore promotes the system. The federal prison law requires parole commission to conduct hearing every 18 to 24 months, depending on the length of the sentence. The United Kingdom, the parole board is also drawn a wider circle of professionals. The board typically makes judgments about whether a prisoner will affect public safety if released, but do not form an opinion on whether the initial sentence was appropriate. The board are a non-departmental public bodies, respectively, of the UK government. And last is my references. They are the Corrections in America, 14th edition, our book, class notes taken from module work, Justice Policy Institute, FDLE, the WHO, and the U.S. Department of Justice. Thank you.